At 6:14 on a Tuesday morning, two men in tan uniforms cut the chain on my farm gate, drove onto my gravel lane, and nailed a 24-hour dispossession notice to the post. They said they were Bellweather County deputies, authorized to remove me from all 412 acres before noon the following day. Then Vanessa Whitmore stepped out of a black luxury SUV, wearing a scarlet blazer and the satisfied smile of someone arriving early for an execution. Mercer Farm has been absorbed into Briar Glen Estates under Article 7, Section 4, she said. You've ignored lawful notices, refused to pay assessments, and remained here as a trespasser. I stood on my porch holding a plain white coffee mug. Vanessa pointed at me. If he refuses to leave, handcuff him. One of the men climbed the porch steps and closed his fingers around my wrist. Neighbors had begun gathering beyond the cut gate, and Vanessa made sure they could see it. That was the point. She didn't just want my land. She wanted me marched off it like a criminal. Then a real Bellweather County patrol vehicle rolled into the lane. Deputy Caleb Monroe stepped out, adjusted his duty belt, and studied the men's uniforms without saying a word. He looked at their badges, then at the notice hanging crooked on my gate. Finally, he looked up at me. "Good to see you, sir," he said. Vanessa's smile slipped. She had no idea she was trying to dispossess the one man whose signature controlled the ground beneath nearly everything her HOA depended on. She would learn. Just not that morning. Stay with me, because what Caleb found in that fake writ started Briar Glen's collapse. But the moment 38 homeowners discovered what I actually owned came later, in a packed circuit courtroom. But let me back up to where this actually started. My name is Dale Mercer. I was 56, a working hay farmer and retired Bellweather County survey technician. Vanessa Whitmore was 61, president of Briar Glen Estates, and she believed a title became true if she repeated it loudly enough. Unfortunately for Vanessa, my family had been recording the truth since 1948. Mercer Farm sat 6 miles outside the Bellweather County seat in north-central Missouri. It wasn't a showplace. The farmhouse had weathered wood siding, a deep porch, and one gutter that leaned whenever the wind came hard from the west. Behind it were hayfields, cattle fencing, an equipment shed, and a gravel lane that turned pale as flour in August. My grandfather, Walter Mercer, bought the original acreage under a warranty deed recorded on October 11, 1948. He added neighboring tracts when he could afford them, usually 20 or 40 acres at a time. My father did the same. By the time the farm passed to me, it covered 412 acres and represented 3 generations of taxes, fence repairs, droughts, and signatures. I knew every corner of it. Before I retired, I spent 31 years as a survey technician for Bellweather County. I checked boundaries for road projects, read subdivision plats, located section corners buried under decades of soil, and explained to angry landowners why a fence was not always a property line. I learned early that memory wandered, paint faded, and people lied. Records didn't. I treated land documents the way some men treated detective novels. Every deed, survey, tax receipt, easement notice, and certified letter went into a labeled steel cabinet in my farm office. The room wasn't impressive. It had a scarred wooden desk, 2 county plat books, and a printer that complained before every page. But if somebody claimed an interest in Mercer land, I could usually tell them when it began, where it ran, and which recording number proved it. Briar Glen Estates appeared along my eastern boundary years later. It had 38 large homes, stone entrance pillars, black fencing, 2 ornamental ponds, and a clubhouse with white columns that were decorative rather than structural. Its rules covered mailbox finishes, approved shrubs, basketball hoops, holiday lights, and the number of hours a trash bin could remain visible from the street. My first conversation with Vanessa happened beside my old Ford pickup. I had just climbed down in work boots and a faded plaid shirt when she looked from the rust above my rear wheel to the hay rake behind the barn. "This farm is an obsolete commercial nuisance," she said. "It's lowering the value of a carefully planned residential community." She held a clipboard against her black blouse, as if the clipboard had been issued by the state. Vanessa told me I needed to join Briar Glen immediately. Then she listed the corrections she expected. I was to remove my equipment shed, stop moving tractors before 8 in the morning, screen my fuel tank, and repaint my barn in one of 6 approved earth tones. The barn was already brown. I let her finish. Then I asked one question. Can you show me the annexation agreement signed by me, my father, or my grandfather? Her mouth tightened. Article 7, Section 4 gives Briar Glen authority over adjacent parcels. I asked for the signed agreement. She had none. Instead, she told me the board's attorney would provide whatever documentation was necessary. Then she looked past me toward the farmhouse and said, "Most people find cooperation less expensive than resistance." I nodded, wrote down the date when I got inside, and placed my note in the cabinet marked Briar Glen. Vanessa mistook that silence for fear. She thought an old pickup, dusty boots, and a weathered house told her everything about the man standing in front of her. The following Thursday, she sent me a certified envelope designed to prove it. At 7:32 the following Thursday, the mail carrier handed me a certified envelope thick enough to have opinions. Inside was a 9-page violation packet from Briar Glen's management company. It included photographs of my tractor, hay rake, stock trailer, and equipment shed, all taken from the development entrance with red circles drawn around anything Vanessa considered offensive. The last page imposed a daily fine of $275 for agricultural machinery visible from an HOA common area. The packet cited Declaration Article 7, Section 4, 7 times. I pulled Briar Glen's recorded declaration from my cabinet and read that section again. It allowed the association to accept the voluntary annexation of adjacent property through a written instrument executed by the property owner and recorded with the county. Voluntary was doing a great deal of work. Vanessa never used that word when she spoke to residents. According to the meeting summaries posted online, Article 7 gave Briar Glen the right to absorb neighboring land when necessary to protect property values. That wasn't what the declaration said, but Vanessa had learned that most people trusted a confident voice more than a recorder's stamp. I answered in 4 sentences. I denied that Mercer Farm was subject to Briar Glen's declaration, rejected the fine, and requested the recording number of any instrument bearing the consent of me or any prior Mercer owner. Then I demanded that all future claims identify the parcel, legal description, and source of authority. Before mailing it, I photographed every page. I photographed the envelope, the certified mail label, and the receipt. When the green delivery confirmation came back, I photographed that too. Boring habits win expensive arguments. 9 days later, Briar Glen installed 3 concrete planters along the eastern stretch of my gravel lane. Each weighed close to 800 pounds and contained a little ornamental juniper that looked embarrassed to be involved. The planters narrowed the lane beside the development gate to 11 feet. My hay supplier arrived that afternoon pulling a loaded flatbed. He couldn't clear them without putting 2 wheels into a drainage ditch. With nowhere to turn, he had to reverse nearly half a mile while I walked behind him and watched the blind side. Vanessa stood beside the gate with a clipboard. "This is a private neighborhood amenity," she said. "Commercial traffic is no longer permitted." I asked who owned the ground beneath the planters. "The association controls it," she said. That wasn't my question. She turned away. I measured the remaining lane width, photographed the tire marks, and saved the supplier's delivery invoice and written statement. I did not move the planters. I did not touch the gate. Vanessa wanted a picture of an angry farmer taking matters into his own hands. I gave her paperwork instead. The next Briar Glen meeting drew nearly every household. I sat in the back row beneath an air conditioning vent while Vanessa projected photographs of my barn onto the clubhouse wall. She described rust, diesel noise, livestock odor, and the threat posed by unregulated agricultural activity. Then my picture appeared. "There he is," Vanessa said, tapping the screen. "A squatter in a cowboy costume." A few people laughed. Most didn't. Vanessa continued, "People like Mr. Mercer survive by intimidating respectable homeowners with old paperwork.
This board will not be bullied by a man who refuses to accept progress. Missouri law permitted me to record a conversation I was part of, and the association had admitted me to the meeting, so my phone captured every word from my shirt pocket. I didn't interrupt her.
I waited until member comments, stood, and looked toward the board secretary. Please preserve tonight's minutes, the presentation, and every board or management communication concerning Mercer Farm, I said. Vanessa leaned toward her microphone. Is that a threat? No, ma'am, it's a records request. I left before she could turn it into a performance. The fines kept running. $275 per day became $5,500, then $11,000, then $18,425. Each new statement added late charges, administrative fees, and a line labeled enforcement recovery. Then Vanessa crossed from nuisance into danger. Her management company recorded a claim of lien against all 412 acres of Mercer Farm. The document asserted that my property was bound by Briar Glen's declaration and warned that the association could foreclose if the balance remained unpaid. They recorded it after receiving my title objection. That mattered. I ordered a certified copy from the Bellweather County recorder and found Vanessa's signature on the verification page. She had sworn that the association's claim was accurate after I had specifically asked her to produce the missing annexation instrument. 3 mornings later, I found orange survey paint on my north fence. A white utility van sat near the equipment shed, and a man in a reflective vest was measuring the wall with a laser device. I asked what he was doing. He showed me a work order from a demolition contractor. Attached was an estimate for $13,960 to remove the shed, haul away its contents, and grade the pad. The authorization line named Vanessa Whitmore as the HOA contact. The contractor looked from the paper to me. She said the association would have possession within 2 weeks. I photographed the estimate and asked him to leave. He did. That afternoon, I called Sarah Keene, a land use attorney in the county seat. Sarah had spent 22 years untangling boundary disputes, access claims, and defective liens. She read Vanessa's letters twice, then set the demolition estimate flat on her desk. We can hit them hard now, she said. Not yet. Sarah looked at me over her glasses. I told her I didn't want threats, speeches, or a letter revealing every document in my cabinet. First, I wanted Briar Glen to explain its claim completely, in writing. I wanted Vanessa to identify what she believed the HOA owned, what she intended to take, and how far she was willing to go. Sarah gave a slow nod. The next morning, she sent Vanessa a preservation notice and a demand to release the lien. Vanessa answered by putting my eviction deadline on paper. Sarah's preservation notice went out by certified mail to Vanessa, every board member, and Briar Glen's management company. It demanded that they preserve emails, meeting videos, text messages, contractor instructions, and every document used to create the lien. A second letter gave them 5 business days to release it. Vanessa answered on Briar Glen letterhead. She wrote that the association would pursue foreclosure, obtain possession, and recover its enforcement costs unless I surrendered Mercer Farm within 10 days. She also warned that any machinery remaining after the deadline would be treated as abandoned property. Sarah read the letter and said, "She just authenticated the threat." I put it in a steel cabinet. 2 days later, my access transmitter stopped opening Briar Glen's electronic gate. That route had carried farm deliveries, ambulances, and fire engines for decades. When I pressed the button, the little red light blinked, but the gate stayed shut. Vanessa answered the intercom. "Your privileges have been revoked," she said. "Use the service road while you still have one." I photographed the transmitter, recorded the time, and called the gate company to confirm that the device had been remotely disabled at Briar Glen's request. Then I backed away and took the longer county road, which added 14 miles to a round trip. I did not ram the gate. I did not cut its power. That disappointed her. At 3:18 the next Friday afternoon, I heard chains dragging across gravel.
A tow truck had lifted my restored 1978 stock trailer from a turnout on my side of the fence. I had rebuilt that trailer myself with new flooring, brakes, wiring, and a powder-coated frame. The agreed value policy listed it at $11,800. The driver showed me a private tow authorization signed by Vanessa. It described the turnout as HOA common property. I told him it wasn't. He shrugged and drove away with my trailer anyway. The tow yard wanted $1,240 in removal, storage, and administrative fees. I arrived with a certified boundary survey showing the turnout inside a Mercer tract. A sheriff's sergeant reviewed it, called the tow company owner, and warned him that continued possession after notice could become a different kind of problem. The trailer came home that evening. I kept the tow bill, the release form, and photographs of 2 fresh gouges in the left fender. Vanessa called that a misunderstanding. At the next HOA meeting, she called it progress. The clubhouse was full when she displayed an illustrated plan titled Briar Glen Recreation Reserve. It showed my lower hayfield replaced by walking paths, flower beds, and a gazebo. My farmhouse was gone. So were the equipment shed and barn. After foreclosure, Vanessa told the residents, this neglected acreage will become an asset for the entire community. A man near the front asked whether I had agreed to sell. Vanessa smiled. Mr. Mercer cannot afford to fight 38 homeowners and their legal fund.
Agreement is no longer required. I was standing along the back wall. She saw me and held a smile. I said nothing. By then, Sarah and I had begun collecting certified copies of every relevant record we could identify. We obtained my grandfather's 1948 warranty deed, 3 later boundary adjustments, historical tax maps, utility plats, road petitions, and subdivision filings. Some came from the recorder. Others came from county archives in folders that smelled like dust and damp cardboard. One agreement was indexed under my father's name instead of the developer's subdivision. It was old enough that the typed legal description had faded near the fold. Sarah read it once, then again more slowly. "How many people know you have this?" she asked. "Now, 2. She placed it in a protective sleeve. We still didn't tell Vanessa what it meant. Sarah ordered a fresh Alta boundary survey and a title commitment, covering several narrow tracts near Briar Glen. The survey crew spent 4 days locating monuments, comparing recorded bearings, and checking improvements against title lines. White stakes appeared beside Briar Glen's stone entrance, near the clubhouse landscaping, and along the edge of the retention pond. Vanessa noticed. She drove from stake to stake in her black SUV, photographing them through the window. Then she called the survey company and demanded their removal. The surveyor told her the stakes were on land identified in his engagement and would remain until his work was complete. Her next move came through circuit court. Vanessa filed an emergency petition alleging that I had threatened neighborhood access, interfered with drainage infrastructure, and created an immediate safety risk to Briar Glen residents. She asked for an injunction barring me from approaching the gate, clubhouse, pond, and utility corridors. She attached photographs of the survey stakes as evidence of intimidation. That filing gave Sarah exactly what she wanted. The court declined to issue an order without hearing from both sides. Instead, Judge Miriam Holt consolidated Vanessa's injunction request with our title challenge and lien claim. She set a full evidentiary hearing and directed the parties to bring original recorded instruments, surveys, and title evidence. Vanessa had created a public arena where every word she had written could be tested. We sent another round of certified notices. One went to the HOA. One went to its management company. One went to its insurer. Each board member received an individual copy. The notices cited recorder's book and page numbers, legal descriptions, 2 cure deadlines, and a provision Vanessa had apparently never read. They explained that certain statements in the lien and emergency petition had placed Briar Glen in default under a recorded instrument. I won't tell you yet what that default affected. Vanessa received her copy during a board session. She held it up for the room, tore it down the middle, and dropped both pieces onto the table. "Old farmers collect old paper because they have nothing else," she said. "Mr. Mercer owns a decaying farm. Briar Glen owns the future."
The management company's camera captured the entire performance. Sarah requested the official video under the association's records policy, and its compliance officer delivered it 3 days later, with a certification that it was complete and unedited. Vanessa had put the sentence we needed on video. The court hearing was approaching, but she didn't intend to wait for it. The morning after she tore up the notice, she contacted a private repossession outfit operating 2 counties south. She hired 2 men who had never worked for the Bellweather County Sheriff's Office, gave them tan uniform shirts and star-shaped badges, and provided written instructions to remove me before neighbors left for work.
The dispossession notice they carried had no valid case number. The clerk's name was misspelled. The county seal had been copied from an unrelated filing. At 6:14 the following Tuesday, those men cut my chain. Vanessa believed she had finally brought the law to my gate. What she brought was evidence. At 6:14 that Tuesday morning, bolt cutters snapped through the chain on my gate. The 2 men drove a gray repossession vehicle up the gravel lane and stopped below my porch. Both wore tan shirts, dark trousers, and star-shaped badges. One carried a clipboard, the other carried handcuffs. "We're civil deputies with Bellweather County," the taller man said. "You are being dispossessed under court authority. Pack 1 bag. You must vacate before noon." I set my coffee mug on the porch rail. "What are your names and badge numbers?" The taller man identified himself as Deputy Hall and gave me badge number 714. The other said his name was Deputy Harris, then gave me the same number. "Which judge issued the writ?" I asked. "Holt," Hall said. "Daniels," Harris said at nearly the same time. That was when Hall shoved the paper toward me. The heading said, "Writ of Possession." But the case number did not match Vanessa's pending circuit court petition. It didn't match anything on the public docket. The clerk's surname was printed as Ruiz instead of Ruiz, and the signature looked like it had been lifted from another document and stretched sideways. The men had already made 3 mistakes. Then Vanessa's black SUV came through my open gate. She stepped onto the gravel in that scarlet blazer and looked toward the county road where several neighbors had gathered. Curtains moved in 2 houses beyond the fence. A man stood near the stone entrance holding up his phone. Vanessa had chosen the hour carefully. "He has exhausted every appeal," she announced. "Remove him." I said, "There hasn't been an appeal." She pointed at the men. "If he refuses, cuff him." Let everyone see what happens when a trespasser defies lawful authority. Harris came up the porch steps and gripped my left wrist. I kept my arms loose at my sides. I didn't resist, threaten either man, or reach for the paper. My phone was recording from my shirt pocket, and 3 security cameras covered the porch, lane, and gate. I had also made a call the previous evening. One of Sarah's contacts had learned that Vanessa was asking private repossession companies about physical removal. I reported the possibility of unlawful service to the sheriff's office and asked for nothing except a patrol check. A charcoal Bellweather County vehicle turned into the lane before Harris closed the first handcuff. Deputy Caleb Monroe stepped out in a real uniform with a real county patch, body camera, radio, and badge number that dispatch could verify. I knew Caleb from my years locating section corners and assigning rural emergency addresses. We had spent plenty of wet mornings standing beside county roads with maps spread across truck hoods. He looked at the 2 tan uniforms, then at the cut chain. "Good to see you, sir," he said to me. Vanessa's expression changed. Caleb asked Harris to release my wrist. Then he requested identification, agency credentials, and the original writ. Hall claimed they were special civil contractors. Harris said they had been deputized for the morning. "By whom?" Caleb asked. Neither man answered. Caleb studied the badges and paperwork without relying on anything I told him. He radioed dispatch and read both names aloud. Dispatch confirmed that neither man worked for the sheriff, neither had been deputized, and no writ of possession existed for Mercer Farm. Caleb told them to place their hands where he could see them. Vanessa stepped forward. "They are acting for Briar Glen. The association's authority is as good as the county's." Caleb's body camera captured every syllable. "No, ma'am," he said. "It is not." He placed both men in investigative detention and called for another unit. A search of their vehicle produced the copied county seal,
extra dispossession notices, 2 sets of handcuffs, and a folder containing Vanessa's written instructions. One line directed them to create a visible removal before 7 in the morning so residents would understand that Briar Glen controlled the property. The sheriff's office opened investigations into false impersonation and attempted unlawful restraint under Missouri law. The copied seal and fabricated court document went to the county prosecutor for review. Vanessa was escorted away from my porch while neighbors watched, but that did not decide the land dispute. The criminal evidence proved how far she had gone. It did not answer what Briar Glen owned. She understood that distinction well enough to face reporters outside the sheriff's office that afternoon. "This was a contractor misunderstanding," she said. "Mr. Mercer will still lose his farm in circuit court."
Sarah and I spent that evening completing our final filing. We attached the lien, Vanessa's sworn petition, the survey, the meeting video, and the instructions recovered from the vehicle. One exhibit remained concealed. Sarah placed the aging document in a sealed envelope, filed the required notice, and reserved it for the title hearing. Vanessa still believed she was going to court to take my farm. She was about to discover that the court would be examining the ground beneath Briar Glen instead. At 9:06 on the morning of the title hearing, every bench in the Bellweather County Circuit courtroom was full. Briar Glen residents occupied the first 3 rows. Local reporters lined the back wall beside sheriff's personnel, board members, and the 2 title attorneys sent by the HOA's insurer after it read Vanessa's sworn filings. Vanessa sat at counsel table in her scarlet blazer. She looked prepared for a victory photograph. Judge Miriam Holt entered, called the consolidated cases, and made one point immediately. The court was not there to decide which side had behaved more politely. It would determine whether Briar Glen had jurisdiction over Mercer Farm, whether its lien was valid, and who held title to the disputed tracts shown on the new survey. Vanessa testified first. Her attorney asked what property Briar Glen controlled. Vanessa answered without hesitation. "Every road, gate, common building, drainage feature, and utility corridor serving the development," she said. "The association has maintained and controlled them for years." She claimed Mercer Farm had been absorbed under Article 7, Section 4, and called me an adjacent trespasser who had obstructed HOA property. She said the planters, gate deactivation, trailer removal, and demolition estimate were lawful enforcement measures. Sarah asked her to identify my signed annexation agreement. Vanessa pointed to the declaration. Sarah asked again. "I don't need his signature," Vanessa said. "The board's authority runs with the land." "Where is that stated?" "It is understood." Judge Holt looked down from the bench. "Land ownership is not established by what a board president understands. We will follow the recorded chain." That was when she called Elena Ruiz, the Bellweather County recorder. Elena had brought certified index sheets, archival copies, tax cross-references, and the original microfilm images linked to the disputed legal descriptions. Judge Holt instructed her to begin with my grandfather's warranty deed, recorded October 11, 1948, then trace every conveyance, reservation, lease, and boundary adjustment forward. Not Briar Glen's brochures, not Vanessa's meeting minutes, the land record. Elena projected the 1948 deed onto the courtroom screen and followed the calls in its legal description. She identified the later Mercer acquisitions, then a narrow tract running along the eastern side of what became the farm. On modern maps, it looked irregular. It widened near the county road, curved around a low drainage area, and continued beneath several improvements shown on Briar Glen's subdivision plat. The fresh Alta survey appeared beside it. Elena enlarged the overlay. A murmur moved through the residents. The tract covered 18.6 acres. Briar Glen's only entrance road crossed it from the county highway. So did the electronic gate and gatehouse. The lines widened beneath the clubhouse, wrapped around the stormwater basin, and followed the primary conduits carrying water, power, communications, and sewer connections into the development. The residential lots were outside it. The things connecting those lots were not. Judge Holt asked who held fee title to the 18.6 acres. Elena checked the chain, looked toward the screen, and answered, The current owner of record is Dale Mercer. Vanessa turned toward her attorney. He stopped writing. Elena then opened the document Sarah and I had held back until it could be properly authenticated. It had been indexed in 1976 under my father's name, Thomas Mercer, and cross-referenced to the original developer rather than the later Briar Glen corporate name. It was a 50-year ground lease. My father had not sold that corridor to the developer. He had leased it, so roads, drainage works, utility conduits, and community facilities could be constructed, while the surrounding residential lots were developed. The document was recorded, signed, notarized, and identified by book and page number in the county index. The original developer later assigned its interest to Briar Glen Estates. When the HOA accepted the common facilities, it also accepted the leasee's obligations.
Vanessa had inherited a lease she never bothered to read. Judge Holt asked Elena to identify its expiration date.
December 31st, 2026, she said. Sarah then directed her to Section 14. That section gave the lessee one option to renew. It was not automatic. Briar Glen had to deliver written notice at least 180 days before expiration, remain current on every obligation, and make no adverse ownership claim against the Mercer remainder. The notice deadline had passed. No renewal had been recorded. None had been mailed to me. Briar Glen's own management records contained no draft, board vote, or delivery receipt. Missing the deadline was only the first problem. By recording a lien against all 412 acres, demanding foreclosure, and swearing that Mercer Farm belonged under HOA control, Vanessa had asserted an adverse ownership claim against the very remainder protected by Section 14. Our certified notices had given Briar Glen the contractual cure period. She tore hers in half. Sarah played the official meeting video. Vanessa appeared on the courtroom screen holding our notice above the polished board table. "Old farmers collect old paper because they have nothing else," the recorded Vanessa said. "Mr. Mercer owns a decaying farm. Briar Glen owns the future." Behind the screen image, Sarah projected the first page of the 1976 ground lease. Nobody laughed. One of the insurer's title attorneys asked for a recess. Judge Holt granted 20 minutes. Briar Glen residents gathered in the hallway, asking one another whether their homes were at risk. They weren't. That distinction mattered to me, and Sarah made it plain when court resumed. Each of the 38 houses stood on a separately deeded residential lot owned by its homeowner. I had never challenged those deeds. I had no claim to their kitchens, yards, garages, or mortgages. The HOA corporation's problem was narrower and far more humiliating. It did not own the infrastructure it had represented as common property for years. It occupied the 18.6-acre corridor as a lessee, and its only renewal option had been lost through missed notice and uncured default. Judge Holt spent the afternoon comparing the evidence. She reviewed the original lease, the Lena's recorder index, the ALTA survey, historical tax records, utility plats, assignment documents, and every certified letter Vanessa had sent. She also examined Article 7, Section 4. Then she read the part Vanessa always omitted. Voluntary annexation required a written instrument signed by the adjacent owner and recorded with the county. There was no Mercer signature. There was no annexation instrument. The declaration could not reach across a boundary merely because Vanessa wanted it to. At 4:21, Judge Holt delivered her ruling from the bench. "The claim of lien against Mercer Farm is void," she said. Vanessa's foreclosure request was denied. The court confirmed my title to the 412-acre farm and specifically to the 18.6-acre corridor identified in the survey. It found that Briar Glen's right to occupy the common parcel continued only through the lease term. After expiration, any corporate occupation without a new agreement would constitute holdover possession. The gavel came down once. Vanessa stood and whispered urgently to her attorney. He pulled her back into her chair. Judge Holt wasn't finished. She found that Briar Glen had received actual notice of the ownership dispute before recording the lien. Vanessa's letters, sworn petition,
and recorded meeting statements showed that the adverse claim was deliberate, not an indexing mistake or innocent misunderstanding. Her own words established that she meant to replace my title with the HOA's asserted control. The judge ordered the lien released and awarded me attorney fees under the ground lease's enforcement provision.
Survey costs, title expenses, and damages would be determined after documentation from the parties and the insurer. Then she addressed the fake writ. The copied county seal, fabricated clerk's signature, and written removal instructions were referred to the county prosecutor for criminal review. The lien verification was referred separately for examination as a possible false filing. Judge Holt made clear that the title ruling did not decide criminal guilt, but the record would be preserved. Finally, she scheduled a court-supervised surrender plan. The HOA would have to vacate the gatehouse, clubhouse, and other corporate facilities on the leased ground when the term ended. It could not block the road, remove utility infrastructure, drain the basin, or punish residents during the transition. Emergency services and all 38 homeowners would retain safe access while the court considered permanent easements. That was important. Vanessa had spent months pretending she could use a gate to decide who belonged. The court made sure she could not use it one last time. Outside, reporters surrounded her on the courthouse steps. Residents stood behind them holding copies of the judgment. Vanessa tried to say the lease was a technicality and that the board would appeal, but one of the insurer's attorneys quietly stepped away from her before she finished. The people of Briar Glen had arrived expecting to watch me lose my farm. Instead, they learned their president had forfeited control of the road home. And at the special HOA meeting 3 nights later, they were finally going to decide what to do with her. The special HOA meeting began at 700 on a Thursday evening, and every folding chair in the clubhouse was occupied. Residents stood along the walls and crowded the doorway. I took the same seat beneath the air conditioning vent where Vanessa had once displayed my photograph and called me a squatter in a cowboy costume. This time, her photograph was in the evidence packet. The acting board secretary read Judge Holt's ruling aloud. Then the treasurer projected the missed renewal deadline, our certified cure notices, the legal invoices, and Vanessa's written instructions to the 2 fake deputies. Briar Glen had spent $83,940 trying to take land it had never owned. Vanessa stood before the display in her scarlet blazer. "This is Dale Mercer's fault," she said. "He concealed an obscure document so he could ambush this community." Sarah answered from beside me. "The lease was recorded in 1976. Your management company received its recording number 3 times. A resident in the second row asked why Vanessa had ordered my public removal before the title hearing. "I relied on contractors," she said. The secretary held up the instructions bearing Vanessa's signature. "You told them to make it visible." The first vote removed Vanessa as president. 34 homeowners voted yes, 2 voted no, 2 abstained. The second vote terminated the management company for failing to review title records, recording the invalid lien, and disabling access without verified authority. Vanessa demanded another ballot. That was when the clubhouse doors opened. Deputy Caleb Monroe entered with an investigator from the county prosecutor's office. The room went silent as they crossed the floor Vanessa had once used like a stage. Caleb stopped beside her chair and served her with a summons connected to solicitation of false impersonation, attempted unlawful restraint, and use of a copied county seal. Vanessa stared at the papers. "You cannot do this during a private meeting." Caleb glanced at the packed room. "Service is complete, ma'am," he said. She had ordered strangers to put handcuffs on me in front of my neighbors. The county served her in front of the residents she had lied to, legally, publicly, quietly. The court-supervised surrender began after the ground lease expired. It happened in steps, because Judge Holt would not allow Vanessa's failure to become an emergency for innocent homeowners. At 8:10 on a Monday morning, bonded movers entered the clubhouse under supervision. They boxed the HOA's records, disconnected its computers, and carried out the polished conference table where Vanessa had torn up my notice. The management company's furniture went into a truck.
Association records went to temporary offices rented in town. The gatehouse was vacated next. Its control panels were inventoried, and the HOA surrendered every transmitter log and access list. Then the electronic gate came down. A licensed contractor disconnected the power, unbolted the steel arms, and lifted them onto a flatbed.
Sheriff's deputies kept traffic moving while residents watched from the roadside. No tractors pushed it over. No chains tore it loose. A court order and a work permit did the job. Once the entrance was clear, Sarah recorded 38 non-exclusive access easements, one benefiting each residential lot. A separate easement guaranteed permanent access for ambulances, fire engines, utility crews, school buses, deliveries, and other lawful visitors. The homeowners kept the road home. The easements ran with their individual lots, not with the authority of any HOA president. No future board could disable a resident's transmitter, block my farm deliveries, or claim ownership of Mercer Farm as leverage in a rules dispute. Some people asked why I protected residents who had sat silently while Vanessa attacked me. The answer was simple. Their homes were never my target. Vanessa had tried to make ordinary families dependent on her control of a gate. I had no interest in becoming another Vanessa. The former clubhouse remained on my 18.6-acre corridor, but it did not stay empty. I leased it at a modest rate to the Bellweather County Fire Protection District. They converted the main room into a rural training space, stocked emergency medical supplies in a side office, and used the old boardroom for storm response coordination. The white columns stayed. The brass Briar Glen plaque did not. The building Vanessa used to enforce shrub heights became a public emergency response annex. Deputy Monroe said that was the first honest work the place had ever done. The financial reckoning took another 4 months. Briar Glen's insurer reviewed Sarah's invoices, the Alta survey, title costs, trailer recovery expense, fence repair, lost deliveries, and damages tied to the wrongful lien and access interference. The documented total was $142,680. The insurer paid the covered portion. Intentional act exclusions left Vanessa responsible for part of the loss, along with her own defense costs. The homeowners were not handed some impossible multi-million-dollar punishment. They had to rebuild their association's finances, but they kept their houses and their access. Vanessa lost the control she had abused. The lien release happened at the Bellweather County Recorder's Office. Elena Ruiz entered the satisfaction and release against the same property description Vanessa had used to threaten foreclosure. She stamped the certified copy, slid it across the counter, and said, "Mercer Farm is clear." I put that document in the steel cabinet marked Briar Glen. The final visible piece came off my land at 10:24 the following Wednesday. 2 sheriff's deputies supervised while a sign company removed the last HOA signs from the entrance corridor. One said, "Private HOA property." Another warned that unauthorized farm vehicles would be towed. The bolts squealed. The signs came down. By early summer, hay was moving through my lower field again. Residents drove along the recorded easement without stopping at a gate or asking a board for permission. The fire district had trucks parked beside the former clubhouse, and the old turnout held my restored stock trailer with its fender repaired. One afternoon, I sat on the same porch with the same white coffee mug while wind moved through the pasture. Caleb pulled into the lane, climbed the steps, and nodded at the cup. "That coffee caused more trouble than most arrest warrants," he said. "It stayed out of the evidence locker," I told him. Vanessa thought the loudest person owned the road, but the quietest man on the street was the one holding the map. Do you think I was right to protect the homeowners after their board attacked me? Tell me in the comments. And if you've ever tangled with an HOA, share what happened. I read every story.